All right, let's dive into some time management strategies. You sent over two really interesting articles, one from Upwork, that's the platform for freelancers, and another from the University of Georgia. So are you feeling like swamped with deadlines, maybe?
Well,
You're
yeah.
struggling to fit in some personal projects? Well, we're going to use these articles to sort of help you achieve better balance, however that looks for you.
It's funny you mentioned balance because both of these articles actually emphasize like good time management. It's not about just cramming your schedule, it's more about aligning your time with things that really matter to you.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. So it's not just about working faster, but working smarter.
Right.
And both articles start off with some pretty basic strategies. I mean, we've all heard of to-do lists, but I'm guessing there's more to it than just writing things down.
Yeah, for sure. The real power of the to-do list comes from prioritizing those tasks. Both Upwork and UGA stress ranking them by importance and urgency. Imagine if you started each day knowing exactly which tasks you needed to tackle first.
Oh, I really like that. So instead of just having this random list, I need to be strategic about it. So let's say I have a presentation to finish for work, but I also want to start learning, that new software that I've been putting off. Which one should I prioritize?
Well, it depends. Is that presentation due tomorrow? If so, it's definitely urgent AD important. It should go right at the top of your list. The software, while that's important for your long-term goals, maybe you can schedule that for later in the week when you have a little more breathing room.
Ah, I see. So it's about figuring out what needs my attention right now versus what can maybe wait a bit. And that actually leads perfectly into the next point that both articles make.
Hmm.
Breaking down those big, overwhelming tasks. UGA uses this great analogy of snowballing.
Oh, that's perfect. Instead of looking at a huge project and feeling kind of paralyzed, right? You break it down into smaller, manageable chunks. Each step that you complete is like adding another layer to that snowball. And eventually you have that big, impressive final result.
I love that visual. It's so helpful. It makes those big projects feel so much less intimidating. Upwork also adds this idea of batching similar tasks together.
Right, exactly. So let's say you've got a bunch of emails to respond to, maybe some phone calls to make, invoices to send. It's much more efficient to group those similar tasks together and knock them out in one go.
That makes a lot of sense. It's like getting in the zone for a particular type of work, right? And maximizing your efficiency. I feel like this could really help me streamline my workflow,
Uh,
but I have to admit, even with like the best to-do lists and a perfectly organized schedule, I still get
yeah.
sidetracked,
Yeah.
distractions.
Oh, absolutely. And Upwork is pretty straightforward about it. They actually call distractions productivity killers.
Uh,
It's just so easy to fall into the trap of checking social media every 5 minutes or getting sucked into these endless email
Oh,
chains.
tell me about it. I constantly feel like I'm battling my phone for my attention.
Mm.
So how do we combat those distractions? Any practical tips from the articles?
Both have some great strategies. Upwork suggests actually scheduling specific times to check your email and social media instead of constantly interrupting your flow.
So instead of being reactive, I should be proactive about when I engage with those platforms. That actually sounds really freeing. What about creating a distraction-free workspace?
That's another key point, especially if you're working from home. Upwork recommends things like noise canceling headphones, decluttering your desk, and even letting your family or roommates know when you just need uninterrupted time.
Right, it's all about setting those boundaries, both physically and mentally.
Hmm.
But what if I need to be available for urgent matters?
Well, Upwork suggests communicating those expectations clearly. Let your team or your clients know what your typical response times are. And provide, maybe, alternative contact methods for truly urgent situations.
So it's all about finding that balance, minimizing distractions while still being accessible. Now, before we move on to some more, advanced time management techniques, I want to hear what's standing out to you so far. What's resonating?
I think it's really interesting how both articles, even though they're coming from these totally different angles, they really emphasize the importance of self-awareness. You need to understand kind of your why for wanting to improve your time management, identify your biggest distractions, and then figure out what strategies actually suit your work style. You know it's not one size fits all.
That is such a great point. It's about creating a system that works for you, not trying to force yourself into a mold that doesn't fit.
Okay, I'm ready to dive into some of those more advanced techniques. The Upwork article mentions something called the Eisenhower matrix. It sounds pretty intense.
It does sound intense, but it's actually a very visual and easy to understand tool for prioritizing tasks. Imagine a simple grid. You've got urgent on one side
Right.
and important on the other. This creates these 4 boxes that you sort your tasks into.
Okay, I'm picturing it. So the first box would be for things that are both urgent and important.
Mhm.
Exactly. Those are the tasks that just need your attention and now, Widjo. Things like maybe meeting a deadline that's looming or dealing with some kind of crisis at work. Those go straight to the top of your list.
Okay, got it. What about things that are important but not necessarily urgent? Those long-term goals that we tend to push aside.
Yeah, that's the second box. And that's where things get interesting. These are tasks that really contribute to your overall goals and well-being, but they don't have that, immediate fire under them. Think about things like professional development, planning for a future project, or even nurturing your relationships.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
It's so easy to neglect those things when you're caught up in the day-to-day. So the Eisenhower matrix helps you visually see that those tasks deserve a spot in your schedule too.
Exactly.
I like that.
Now, the third box is for tasks that are urgent but not important. These are the ones that often feel like they demand your attention, but they don't actually contribute much to your goals.
Okay, so that would be things like responding to emails that could have been avoided, attending meetings that could have been summarized in an email, or maybe even dealing with other people's emergencies that aren't really my responsibility.
You got it. And the beauty of the Eisenhower matrix is it helps you identify those tasks so you can either delegate them, automate them, or eliminate them entirely.
That's brilliant. It's like giving yourself permission to say no to those things that are stealing your time but not adding value.
Yeah.
Okay, what about the last box? Not urgent, not important.
Ah, that's the danger zone. These are the ultimate time wasters. Things like scrolling through social media mindlessly, watching hours of TV, or just engaging in activities that don't align with your goals or bring you joy.
Oh, it's like giving those activities a reality check. Yeah, I can see how the Eisenhower matrix helps you visualize your priorities and make conscious choices about where your time is going.
Exactly. It empowers you to take control of your schedule and ensure that you're focusing on the things that really matter.
Okay, that's a game changer. I'm definitely going to start using this matrix. Speaking of focusing on what matters, Upwork also talks about this principle called the 80-20 rule or the Pareto principle. Can you explain that one?
Absolutely. It's this fascinating concept that suggests that 80% of our results actually come from just 20% of our efforts. The challenge, of course, is figuring out which 20% of our to-do list is driving those results.
So again, it's not about working harder, it's about working smarter,
Right.
right? But how do I actually apply that principle to my daily life? Feels kind of abstract.
Think about it like this. Let's say you're working on a big project at work. There are probably a handful of tasks that, if done well, will have the biggest impact on the success of that project. The 80-20 rule encourages you to identify those high-impact tasks and prioritize them, even if it means pushing aside some of the smaller, less impactful items on your list.
So it's like being strategic about where I invest my time and energy. Instead of getting bogged down in the minutia, I should be focusing on those activities that move the needle forward. I like it.
Exactly. And the 80-20 rule can actually be applied to all areas of your life, from your work projects to your personal goals. It's about identifying what they call the vital few and letting go of the trivial many.
Okay, that's a powerful concept. It's like simplifying your to-do list and focusing on what truly matters.
Now, the University of Georgia article delves into a few different time blocking techniques, like the Pomodoro method. Can you break that down for me? I've heard of it, but I've never actually tried it.
It's actually pretty simple. The Pomodoro technique involves working in these focused intervals, typically 25 minutes, followed by a short break. The idea is that these structured bursts of work help you maintain your concentration and prevent mental fatigue.
So instead of trying to power through hours of work, I'm basically building in these like mini sprints into my day. I can see how that could be helpful, especially when I'm tackling those tasks that require a lot of focus.
Exactly. And the beauty of the Pomodoro method is that it's so adaptable. You can adjust those interval lengths to suit your personal preferences and the nature of the task. If you're working on something highly creative, you might want to extend those work intervals to maybe 45 minutes or even an hour.
So it's not about being a slave to the timer. It's about using it as a tool to structure your workflow and boost your productivity.
I like that flexibility. What happens if I get interrupted during a Pomodoro? Does that ruin the whole thing?
Well, it's not ideal, but it happens. The key is to simply acknowledge the interruption, make a note of where you left off, deal with the interruption as quickly as possible, and then jump right back into your Pomodoro when you're able.
Okay, that makes sense. It's about being flexible and not letting those inevitable interruptions derail your entire day.
Exactly. Now, Both articles also talk about the importance of leveraging technology to really supercharge your time management efforts. Upwork, in particular, dives into this world of time tracking software. Time tracking software. I've heard of it, but honestly, it's always seemed a bit intense. Is it really necessary?
It depends on your needs and preferences. Time tracking software can be incredibly valuable for gaining a deeper understanding of how you're actually spending your time. It's like shining a light on those hidden time sinks that we often don't even realize are eating away at our productivity.
Okay, that's an interesting
Mm.
perspective. So it's not just about tracking like billable hours. It's about becoming more aware of my own work patterns.
Exactly. Time tracking software can reveal things like how much time you're spending on emails, meetings, specific projects, or even those dreaded distractions. And it can help you identify areas where you might be unknowingly wasting time.
I can see how that data can be valuable. But there are so many different time tracking apps out there. How do I even choose the right one?
That's a great question. It really depends on your individual needs and preferences. Some people prefer just simple manual trackers, where they log their time manually, while others prefer more automated software that kind of tracks their activity in the background. Some apps are designed for freelancers and solopreneurs, while others are geared toward teams and larger organizations.
So it's about finding the right tool that fits my workflow. It gives me the information I need to make better decisions about my time.
Mhm.
Okay, that's making more sense now.
Exactly. And the beauty of technology is there's a tool for just about everything these days, from to-do list apps and calendar reminders to project management software and communication platforms. Technology can help you automate, streamline, and optimize your workflow in ways that were just unimaginable a few years ago.
It's like having a digital assistant to help you manage your time more effectively.
So, with all of these amazing tools and techniques at our disposal, is there a risk of becoming too robotic? I mean, do we really need to schedule every minute of our day? That's a great question, and it actually brings us to a really important point that both articles emphasize: the importance of self-care and downtime. Time management isn't about becoming a productivity machine, it's about creating a sustainable and fulfilling life.
Okay, that's reassuring. I'm all for being efficient, but I don't want to turn into a robot. What are some of the self-care tips that are mentioned in the articles?
Well, the UGA article actually talks about the importance of managing family time. They even suggest things like shared digital calendars to avoid scheduling conflicts.
Oh, that's so important. It's so easy to let work take over and neglect our personal lives.
Exactly. And remember the 80-20 rule we talked about. It can be applied to self-care as well. What are the 20% of activities that bring you the most joy and relaxation? Make sure you're prioritizing those, even if it means saying no to some other commitments.
That's a great reminder. It's about finding that balance between work, personal life, and those activities that nourish our minds and bodies. Okay, I'm feeling a lot more optimistic about time management now. It's not about being perfect or squeezing every last minute out of the day. It's about being intentional with my time and creating a life that feels good.
That's exactly it. It's about finding what works for you, experimenting with different techniques, and creating a system that supports your goals and values. It's about finding what works for you, experimenting with different techniques, and creating a system that supports your goals and values.
I feel like we've covered so much ground already, from simple to-do lists to the power of saying no and embracing those bigger picture concepts like the 80-20 rule. But I'm curious, out of all the techniques that we've discussed, which ones have really resonated with you?
Honestly, I'm really impressed by how both the Upwork and the UGA articles, even though they're coming from totally different worlds, they both land on the same idea. Mindful time management. It's about being intentional, self-aware, and making choices that align with your values.
You've hit the nail on the head. It's not about like speed or cramming. It's about making sure the right things are getting done. So for our listener who's been taking all of this in, what's the next step? Where do they go from here?
Well, they've got a toolkit now. That's the exciting part. Think about which strategies sparked that aha moment for you. Was it the Eisenhower matrix for sorting tasks? The Pomodoro technique for those focused work bursts? Or maybe it was the 80-20 rule for figuring out where to really put your energy. My advice: choose one thing and put it into action this week.
Oh, I love that challenge. Start small, experiment, see what sticks, and if it doesn't work, no worries. Try something else. There's no one right way to do this, right?
Absolutely not. And that's something that Upwork actually really stressed, understanding your own personal work style
Mm.
and what makes you tick. Maybe time blocking works wonders for some people, but for others, it feels too rigid. It's all about that self-discovery.
As we wrap up this deep dive, I have one final thought for you to ponder. Imagine it's a year from now. You've consistently applied even just one of these techniques. How would your life be different? What goals would you have accomplished? That's the real power of time management. It's not just about schedules and to-do lists. It's about shaping your future. Thanks for joining us.
It's about finding what works for you, experimenting with different techniques, and creating a system that supports your goals and values.
Yeah, and I think one thing that's really come through for me is how much both these articles stress personalizing this stuff. I mean, we've covered a lot, from those basic to-do lists to that idea of time tracking, which I'll admit I was a bit skeptical about at first.
Yeah, it can seem intimidating.
It really can. But I like how you framed it. It's not about micromanaging every second. It's more about awareness, right?
Exactly. It's about understanding where your time is actually going so you can make more conscious choices.
So for our listener, who's now armed with all this knowledge, what would you say is the most important takeaway?
That's a tough one. There's so much good stuff in both these articles.
There really is.
But I think if I had to boil it down to one thing, it's that time management isn't about perfection.
It's not about being a robot, like
Yeah.
we talked about.
Right, exactly. It's about progress, not perfection.
I love that. So even just implementing one small change can make a big difference over time.
Absolutely. Small steps, consistency, and finding what works for you.
And, speaking of finding what works, I think a great place to start is with those simple strategies we talked about
Oh,
earlier.
for sure. Like that prioritized to-do list. Or setting aside dedicated time for focused work.
Right, and even just being more mindful of distractions can have a huge impact on your productivity.
No doubt about it.
Well, on that note, I think it's time to wrap up this deep dive.
Time flies when you're managing it well.
Very true. A huge thank you to our listener for sending in these fantastic articles and for joining us on this exploration of time management strategies. We hope you found this deep dive valuable. And remember, even small changes can lead to big results. So take what you've learned, experiment, and start creating a schedule that works for you. Until next time.